Hey guys, it's Greg Bell, and you're now listening to the Legends Community Show right here on thepowervoices.com. I'm your host, as I said, Greg Bell. Welcome to another week of football talk, sports talk, and a little bit of everything talk. Of course, I'm just going through my whirlwind tour here. I've been back on the East Coast, guys, having a ball of fun. I'm going to talk about some of the things that were happening back in South Bend, Indiana. Got a great ward. I got a ward called the Harvey G. Foster. It's basically sports humanitarian work that we do, and I got to take my hands and give a big clap to Notre Dame. Sometimes you want to be acknowledged, sometimes you ought to be acknowledged, sometimes you don't really care. And for about 20, 30 years now, Athletes for Life has done a lot of work, and it's been one of those things where the labor was more important than the rewards. But I have to say thank you to Mark Rothfuss, one of my classmates. He decided to recommend to the university that they acknowledge the work that Athletes for Life and yours truly have been doing for some 28 to 30 years now. And guys, I tell you what, it's great to have friends. It's great to have a lot of loyal friends, but I've got some outstanding, truly loyal friends that have been with me for 35, 40 years. And I take my hat off to those guys, and I want to tell them I love them. I thank them for supporting me this past weekend. Back on the campus of the University of Notre Dame, had a ball of fun. It's great to be remembered, but it's even more greater to be acknowledged. And they acknowledged the foundation work that we've been doing here in Southern California for now over 30 years, like I said. And this goes out to all my sponsors. It goes out to my board. It goes out to all the mentors I have had over my lifetime. I thank you for everything you do for the foundation, what you've done for me, and God bless. Now let's talk about some football, of course. I was back on the campus. Of course, Notre Dame Stadium now has been redeveloped, redesigned, probably the finest university stadium in the country. It might not sit the largest, but it sure enough will serve the largest. This is a full-service stadium. Man, I'm going to tell you what. About 3-4 years ago, I went back to Michigan in Notre Dame game, and I said Michigan had the cat's meow. Now I can say that my own proud university, Notre Dame, has the cat's meow of all stadiums. Not only is it a stadium, but it's a 24/7 media center. Digital media blows. It's amazing. That's all I can tell you. Then they've got the student center. So many people have always had a external stadium or building for their students to congregate and to come together as a crowd. They get to do it as part of the stadium, and they can see the stadium, and it's just all I can tell you. It is a fabulous stadium. If you have an opportunity, and if you haven't got your tickets for later in the year or anything of that nature, get yourself some tickets. Go see a Notre Dame game. See what is the finest stadium in the country today. Now to talk about the Fighting Irish. I'm going to start it off by basically saying I'm not disappointed in what I saw. And I'm not upset at what I saw. And I'm not calling for Brian Kelly's head like everybody else. We are getting out of our kids what they have to offer. You can't expect five-star athletes, five-star production from a three-star athlete. Some of these kids were physically outmanned. Our linemen did not show the kind of speed and footwork that, being a preseason All-American, some of them didn't show that. The quarterback, I said this coming in last week, he's not that accurate. The one thing I see in Winbush is a kid who has a very good, strong arm, but his accuracy is going to be something he really has to work on these next 3 years of his eligibility, 4 years of his eligibility, because he's a redshirt freshman this year. Hats off to the Georgia team. They came ready to play. Even when they weren't making mistakes, they made a numerous amount of mistakes against Notre Dame, or the score might have been a little larger. I'm an Irish diehard. I'm not going to talk negatively about what I saw from a pouting standpoint. I'm just going to give y'all the truth. They were a bigger, faster, more aggressive team than the Notre Dame Fighting Irish I saw last week. And even though Notre Dame outplayed them, so you can outplay people with your athleticism. but you can't physically dominate a bigger person or a faster person. If he's just faster than you, he's just faster than you. And Georgia was a faster team, big team. They remind me of a true SEC team. The linemen were stout. These guys were probably, they probably outweighed us by about 15 pounds across the line. Running backs were stout. They were bigger, faster, more nimble. And this young freshman Fromm came in and did what he was expected to do, control the game without making a lot of mistakes. He made mistakes. They fumbled the ball, threw an interception. Everything that you want to see the opponents do against your team, they did. But the problem that Notre Dame had, is they didn't capitalize. 3 points when you're inside the 30 is not going to make it for this team this year. This team is going to have to put 7 points on the board, at least 28 points, 4 touchdowns a game. That's what they're going to have to do, and they're capable of doing it. That's the beauty of it, is that this team is capable of putting 28 to 35 points on the board against anybody. They create mistakes on their opponent. They're a smart team. I think Brian Kelly's got a very, very smart team. The problem that they're going to have, like I said, is they're not physically dominating anyone. I didn't see that out of this game. They'll probably physically dominate the Bowling Greens, the Miami of Ohio's. They're going to have times with Michigan State. They're going to have times with Michigan. They're going to have hard times with North Carolina. These are some big teams that have built up their offensive front lines and defensive front lines, and they plan to be dominating. Georgia was a bigger, stronger front line, and you saw it as the game wore down. The beef took over. And the quickness of their linebackers was amazing. I saw some of their guys. Both of their outside linebackers were probably 6'5", about 260, 255, and lean and fast. And when you have that kind of production out of your defense, it's going to cause havoc. And that's what Georgia's defense did at the close of the game. Caused Wimbush to have havoc, made him rush into passes. A lot of overthrown balls, a lot of underthrown balls, just couldn't have. He's got to work on his accuracy. That's really what I told everybody. What I saw from him is a very quality quarterback, but his accuracy is going to be his number one nemesis if he doesn't put the time in and work in. And that's really the gist of what the game was last week. It wasn't that Notre Dame got outplayed, because they outplayed Georgia. I think if you were at the game, you saw a Notre Dame team prepared. And part of what when I was back there, I had a chance to be interviewed, and we talked about that. They said, well, what did you see in the Temple game? I said, I saw what I expected to see, a well-prepared team. And I think Brian Kelly prepared them for the game last week. But there's some physical aspects of the game that Brian Kelly can't prepare them for. If the team is just naturally bigger, faster, stronger than you, that's just God's gift. You can't really do anything about that, but you can still play the ball game. And if you play it smart, you'll come away with the win. Notre Dame played it fairly close to smart, but they laxed in some areas, and the biggest area that they laxed in was inside the 30. If you watched Notre Dame last week, they got inside the 30, 35, and all they walked away with were 3 points each time. You've got to score points. And I'm not talking about field goals. When you got a team like a Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, and you get inside the 20 to 30, if you don't walk away with 7 points, you're going to find yourself losing in the end, just like Notre Dame did last week. You don't take anything away from the Irish. They played a very outstanding game. But the problem they didn't do is they couldn't close it out, and that's closing out not in the fourth quarter, guys. I'm not talking about at the end. That's not closing out. Closing out is every time you get that ball inside the 20, 25-yard line, you put 7 points on the board. And that's where they were losing. They put themselves in great position. They did everything you want to do against a fairly good Georgia team. Georgia's going to be a good football team this year. But they did everything you want to see them do, except they didn't close. And when you're in a war, or I shouldn't call it that because that's not the right proper term for it, but when you're in a battle, the guy who comes prepared for that battle is the one that's going to win. And I think in the long side, Notre Dame brought knives to a gunfight. And Georgia brought some shotguns. And they got a very good team. That young freshman is going to do just fine. Eason, get yourself healthy back again. You'll get your starting position back. But This is a team that even if the number one quarterback Eason had played in the game, it wouldn't have been any different outcome. I think they could have caused him into an interception the same way they did Fromm. I think that the backs ran hard for Georgia. They weren't as productive, but they ran hard. Everybody raved about the fact that both of these teams ran the ball for over 300, 400 yards the week before. That's because the teams they played the week before didn't have nearly the quality defenses that both Notre Dame and Georgia brought to the game. And I'm going to say this with no reservation. The new defensive coordinator for Notre Dame did an outstanding job to me because our defense did a great job. They really, truly held this team to 17, actually to about 13 points, 14 points for the game. But, the fumbles in your own area, in your own side of the field, which Notre Dame did towards the end of the game, that led to 6 points that really the defense had no part of adding to. Now, yeah, they played, they gave up some yards. You're going to expect to give up some yards against great teams. But all in all, Notre Dame held that team to 13 points, or I should say 14 points. They did an excellent job against Georgia. They caused them to make turnovers. They caused them to make mistakes, miss blocks. They did everything that was necessary for for the Notre Dame defense to say we won this battle. We just lost it on the scoreboard, and a lot of that was lost because the offense could not produce points, and that's just the bottom line. Notre Dame is going to have a good football team this year. Are they going to be a 10-win team? That's going to depend on the USC game, to be honest. I think we're going to beat the Stanfords. We're going to beat pretty much most of the ACC. I think the UNC game is going to be big. I'm probably going to go back out to that game, maybe broadcast from UNC, just so we can see all what's going on there. But the UNC game is going to be big. I see them playing Boston College, getting a win there, winning Miami. The Miami-Florida game is going to be big. I think USC-Miami are the two games that are kind of the toss-up. Outside of that, Notre Dame should really go through the rest of their schedule. This should be at least a 9-3 team at best. That gives them some element of surprise that most people didn't think they would be. And that should secure Kelly's position for another year. And be honest, if Miami doesn't play with the kind of tenacity that they played with in the past games against us, we'll beat Miami just as well because I think they're a better team than Miami. USC, that's going to be a testimonial wheel right there. I think athletically, USC is about probably the finest university in the country. They've got some pure athletes on this team. In terms of strength, no stronger than Notre Dame, definitely no stronger than Georgia. And in terms of size, no bigger than Notre Dame. I see Notre Dame and SC actually is an evenly matched team just because they've recruited a lot of the same guys, and they've recruited athletic guys, not necessarily big, strong guys. And I think both of them are probably going to get back to that as they continue to see the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Clemsons, who are big teams, big-bodied teams, as they continue to dominate the bowls, the bowl championship series. They're going to, like everything happens in the game, in any sport, when one gets away with it and is successful, the other one seems to follow. And guys, if you haven't heard, there's a lot of following going on in the SEC. Everybody wants to be like Alabama right now. Big, strong, fast. That's the gist of it. Hey, you're listening to the Legends Community Show here on thepowerofvoices.com. I'm your host, Greg Bell. And I want to say this because I know there's a lot of haters out there, but I can say I told you so. I told everybody a week ago that this Ohio State game was going to be Oklahoma's for the taking. And what happened? They get blown out in their own home field, And I know my Buckeye fans and Buckeyes are going to, they're going to call me a hater. But I'm just telling you, that's not a good team. And your quarterback has not improved. When we came into the season, the whole thing was how well of a quarterback JT Barrett was. JT Barrett is not that good of a quarterback. He has skills, but in Urban Meyer's offense, he doesn't produce. I mean, we can look back 2 years ago, and they had a great team. You put Ezekiel Elliott, you got Joey Bosa. You know, they had a gauntlet full of five-star guys. And yes, the word is that Urban Meyer replaced a lot of those five-star guys. But, 39 of 70. What the hell did JT Barrett throw the ball 70 times for? Really? He's not that accurate as it is in the beginning. And now you let him throw 39 completions for 70 attempts, 487 yards. That's not Ohio State football. That's not ground and pound. What happened? I don't even want to think what happened, but it wasn't the running backs. The running backs did not perform with any level of confidence. That's why they threw the ball 70 times. And if JT Barrett would have hit, 60% of his passes, it wouldn't have made a difference. Oklahoma had their number. Oklahoma was a better team, and they went out and did what was necessary for them to get a humongous win. I don't know. I don't know if this is the Ohio State team that we're going to have to see moving down the line, or Urban Meyer's going to make some changes. Urban doesn't like losing, guys. That's the one thing I can tell you about Urban Meyer. You put a 1 on his schedule this early in the season, there's a prediction you're going to have a letdown later in the season. That means he gets a 10-2 record. That's not Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer has been one of the most successful coaches in NCAA history. Outside of Bob Stoops and probably Nick Saban, who do you put in a position? It's not Brian Kelly. It's not Kevin Sumler, for God's sakes. And it's definitely not, I shouldn't say definitely, but D'Antonio. But over the last decade, Urban Meyer has been one of the most successful coaches next to Nick Saban. So now you got him in a position where he's got to, he can sweat a little bit. The older he gets, is this what I want to? Is this what I'm sticking around for? He's won more championships at Ohio State than almost Woody Hayes. So, Buckeye fans, you got to be concerned. I don't think this is going to be a Big Ten championship team. I think that's going to lay in the hands of either Michigan State, or potentially you can't rule out Penn State. Penn State is playing great football right about now. And they showed it last year by winning the Big Ten, that they have the ability to upset the big boys. So when you're looking at the Big Ten right now, it looks like the Big Four, because you still have to. You don't take any disrespect away from D'Antonio. His team is going to ball. Michigan State's going to be up there towards the top. Penn State game is going to be important for all three teams this year, I believe. I think all three of them are playing. All four of the teams have to face each other this year. So the one thing we know we're going to get out of the Big Ten is we're going to have a well-built team that's ready to fight, because they're going to have 4 big, hardy fights. And heck, Ohio State's already had 2 big, hardy fights, and they already played 1 Big Ten team in Indiana. So all I can tell you, if you're a Big Ten observer, expect the Big Ten to show us something special this year, because you've got 4 big battles in there and 4 teams that all could possibility of being in the top 10. We talk about the SEC, we talk about the ACC. We're not really. I doubt if you see too many teams out of the Pac-10 this year, outside of UCLA and USC. If somebody pops up, it's going to be a sleeper. Somebody we weren't expecting. I'm not expecting, but if UCLA can continue playing with the tenacity that they did last week and the week before, oh boy, it's going to be a great big game out. I think this year they're at the Coliseum. It's going to be a hell of a showdown in the Coliseum when those two teams meet later in the season. And as for USC, I don't know what it is, and I'm not going to dog them about it, but some of these games are some, I like seeing Notre Dame play Georgia early in the season. I like seeing the Sooners, play Ohio State early in the season. And I really thought I was going to like seeing USC playing Stanford early in the season, and I don't know what happened. Tell me what happened, Stanford, whoever. Y'all tell me what happened last week. They get blown out by USC, and USC started the season looking very questionable. What are we saying about Stanford right about now? That was, if y'all remember, over the last decade, Stanford was a powerhouse in the Pac-10 or Pac-12, I should call it. man, I'm an old school guy. Everything was Big 10, Pac-10, Big 12. Now it's got so many teams in each one, it just blows my mind. But either way, USC looked a little timid the week before last. But now they come out and they put one to Stanford. And now the question is going to circle how many teams in the Pac-12 are going to be respectable this year. I mean, I can see Stanford walking away with, potentially 3, maybe 4 losses. One to UCLA, probably one to Arizona State as usual. That Arizona State seems to get somebody's number. It probably might be Stanford this year. Oregon is playing a little bit better football than we expected. They're in a rebuilding stage right now. And you never know with Washington or Washington State. You just never know what you're going to get, let alone Oregon State. And now you got BYU, who's 1-1 as well. So 1-2, I should say. It's going to be interesting. I want to see how BYU takes on Wisconsin this week. How well they play against Wisconsin. Wisconsin is one of the better teams in the Big Ten. However, I still don't put them in the Big Four. They got a little work to do. And it probably will start this week if they can get a big-time win over BYU, a dominating win, because this is not a strong Cougars team. And I expect them to show us something that we haven't seen in the first 3 weeks here, because this is not the typical BYU team I expect to see. I expect to see a nice throwing BYU team that really sets a precedent, and they haven't done that as of yet. And how about Illinois in the Big Ten? They're 2-0 right now. Going up against South Florida this weekend, it should be a major win. That's where we sit with the Big Ten. We've talked about the Pac-12. Let's talk about the SEC for just a touch. Nothing. We ain't got to linger on this because the SEC is about Bama. But here's the thing. We talked about it a week ago. What did we see in Florida? And here's the thing. When these 10 players are off suspension from Florida, expect to see a very dynamic Florida team. I think Florida really is prepared to be a nemesis of Alabama. I don't see Florida having much competition from Georgia. I think Florida is a good team. I can see a one-loss Florida team because the fact that they had 10 guys on suspension and Michigan getting by them early in the season. I can see the voters actually putting a 10-1 Florida team into the bowl series, and it could even be a 9-2 Florida team in there because, let's face it, there's going to be a lot of teams that get beat by Alabama. A lot of teams. Pretty much most teams are going to get beat by Alabama. But Alabama's got to be able to close out at the end of the season. And, the one thing I do know about Nick Saban, his competitive drive will continue to lead Alabama to pretty much an undefeated regular season. You're listening to the Legends Community Show here on the powerofvoices.com. I'm your host, Greg Bell. As I said, I was back east. I was also back in my old stomping grounds of Buffalo, New York. I want to shout out to all my Buffalo friends and fans back there. I tell you what, after I left South Bend, I boarded the plane, got to Buffalo for the alumni weekend this past week, and I'm going to tell you what, I was shocked. Did anybody happen to see last week's NFL scores and play? This is the first you're going to hear from me, but we're going to jump into it pretty deep. Let's talk about the Thursday night game, the Chiefs versus the Pats. Who called that one? Did any of you even remotely come close to calling that game? Because if you did, you'd be the $1 billion DraftKings winner this week. $1 billion, I think they were offering, if you could get the perfect lineup. How many people had Alex Smith throwing 28 of 35, over 80 percentile for 368 yards and 4 touchdowns? Who? Tell me who. Who had Tyreek Hill catching 7 catches for 133 yards and 1 touchdown? Nobody. And who had Kareem Hunt running for 148 yards on 17 carries for 1 touchdown? A 42-27 win. Hell, their defense probably mounted up 20 or 30 points for holding the Patriots under 30 points. Who had that first game? And now, guys, I don't want y'all to get me wrong on this one. I'm not just bandwagoning on the Chiefs. What I'm going to stop before you start to think about it, don't get it twisted. This isn't the 40-year-old I told you so. Everybody wants to talk about Tom Brady turning 40 years old, starting the season. How every quarterback in the history of the NFL has declined. Their production has dropped immensely from the time they were 39 to they were 40. Let's not get it twisted. He is still Tom Brady. He is still the probably best quarterback in the history of the game, and he's still probably the best quarterback in the National Football League today. And you can say what you want to say. Yes, he had a bad game. Let's look at some of Tom's marks from last week. Brady didn't have a Brady-type day. That was pretty obvious. And so much was being talked about the injury to Edelman. Those things are going to happen. But the fact that he had a QBR of 35.1 is probably the most shocking thing of all. I think Tom has averaged somewhere close to the 82, 85 percentile in QBRs. And now all of a sudden he drops way down. Didn't throw a touchdown pass last week. So much can be talked about what he did. But Danny Amendola, 100 yards, 6 receptions. He continued to play at his performance. What happened to the Patriots last week? Everybody kept saying, well, what do you think happened to the Patriots? I'm going to tell you what happened to the Patriots, guys. They played against another professional football team who came prepared to play. Any given Sunday, that's the phrase that will always be given to football, any given Sunday. And this was that Sunday. Unfortunately for Brady, this was that Sunday. They came prepared to play. Andy had them, in a great game plan. They took on every element of what the Patriots provided. And I can say this without any reservation, that probably is the first time somebody truly outcoached Bill Belichick. This guy has been a mastermind of making adjustments, taking what happened in the first half, dropping it, and coming back in the second half and making it work a little bit better. Not this time for Bill Belichick. This team truly got outplayed from the beginning to the very end. And the nice thing is it just shows how competitive the National Football League is as a whole. I mean, we hear this all year long. This is, I love these prognosticators who basically said, New England is head above the best team in the NFL. Probably be them and the Raiders in the playoffs for the AFC, and Dallas and the Dallas and the Giants. I don't know who they're thinking in the NFC, but I know they're saying Dallas. That's one team there everybody's trying to put up there on the pedestal. And all of a sudden, boom, New England gets hit with this, and nobody can really say anything. It's like they were frozen. Tom sat there, couldn't really talk too much about his performance. Threw 36 attempts, 16 completions, 267 yards. He had a long of 54, but he really did not look like Tom Brady. There's without a doubt you can say he didn't look like Tom Brady that we are so accustomed to. And here's probably the biggest problem I think I saw in the game. They couldn't run the ball with any efficiency. 3 yards a carry, 3.5 yards. I don't know if this is the team that we're going to see throughout the year or if it's just an anomaly, a one-time anomaly that, they played poorly. Bill didn't coach at the level where we've seen in him. He wasn't able to turn it around in this team. He couldn't make that second half speech to get them back on track. And defensively, they look bad. I don't know. That's the part you can't really put on Brady, and you can't really put it on Belichick, because both of those are the offensive side of the ball. How do we look at this defense and say, whoa, is this the Patriots we've seen over these years? I'm sure Willie McGinnis and Rodney Harrison, those guys that had the glory years playing on that defense, say this is not the Pats defense that we've grown to love and know and produces. So I think more than anything, you've got to look at the way they played the defensive scheme. They truly just got blown out defensively. It wasn't just that the offense sputtered. The entire offense, defense, and special teams sputtered for the New England Patriots last week. And because of that, they came away and they start their season 0-1. I think I think I read something that's the first time in like 15 years they started the season 0-1. Probably back to when they had Craig James and those guys who played on that 84. I think it's back to almost 1989 or something like that. Was the last time they started the season 0-1. So this is a shocker. That was one of those shocking games that I don't think anybody was prepared to see it, let alone thought it was going to happen. But as soon as it happened, the first thing that came out of everybody's mouth was 40-year-old Tom Brady. And this isn't an age discrepancy or, history can change itself. And I think with Brady as well as with the rest of this team, they're going to be okay. I still think they're probably the best team in the AFC, with the Raiders a very close second. The question is who's going to fight in this conference? The Bills started their season off with a 21-12 win over the Jets. I was at the game. The team still doesn't have the type of leadership in Tyrod Taylor that I'd like to see. He still doesn't throw the ball very efficient at all. He still uses his legs when he gets in trouble, not his arm. But, man, the Jets. Defensively, they could do nothing with Shady McCoy. He ran for 110 yards on 22 carries. And Jordan Matthews caught 2 catches for 61 yards for the Bills. But Tyrod Taylor, 16-28 for 224, 2 touchdowns. And every time he got in trouble, he made it about his legs, not about his knowledge in the game of finding the open man. I don't know if Buffalo can win and compete against the Miamis or the Patriots relying strictly on athleticism. It helps. Don't get me wrong here. But Tyrod Taylor, now entering his 3rd, 4th year in the National Football League, he's got to know the schemes. He's got to stop putting his body at risk or in harm's way just to get a 8-yard first down. He's got to be able to find somebody, get the ball to him through the air, and huddle it up again. So it's going to be interesting as to which way they go. But I will say this. It was a very interesting day in Buffalo. I've said it many times before. Buffalo's Alumni Association does one of the greatest things. All the money that we raised, which probably was over $200,000 or $300,000 this past week, it goes to the Dire Need Fund for other players that are having trouble in their life right now. And we've been doing this probably for about 10 years. I've been fortunate enough to be able to pop back there, I think 3 or 4 times. Hats off to Josephus and the crew back there. They do a great job. Great night at the Seneca Casino. Big party. That's where they raise the largest amount. And then, of course, the golf tournament on Monday morning. The barbecue and the Sunday afternoon game. Friday and Saturday, I didn't get a chance to experience those fun evening events, but I will tell you this. We had a great day of golf yesterday out at Hickory Sticks Golf Course in Niagara Falls, and very beautiful course. And B-Dubs Barbecue, I got to tell you, Ben, to the guys that I played with, we had a ball of fun. I enjoyed it. I hope to see you guys another time. Let's run down through some of the scores that came down. I'll try and throw out some conversation about a few of them as well. What did the Falcons think about the Bears? Not too much. The Bears were the Bears. Matt Ryan looked very good, 21 of 30, 321 yards, 1 touchdown. And Austin Hopper, man, I'm going to tell you what. I put in my fantasy DraftKings list, and I didn't have any of these guys, man. Austin Hopper, 2 catches for 128 yards, 1 touchdown. Really? What did my guys do? I think I had A.J. Green, 5 catches for 74 as the Bengals get blown out by the Ravens 20-0. Thank you, A.J. Green. I'm taking you off my fantasy team this week. You just killed me. I thought you was a producer. Well, maybe it was Andy Dalton. He was 16-31 for 170 yards. Man, everybody that you kind of think you got the right picks on when you're doing the fantasy, they bombed for you. They just bombed us out this weekend. And especially, I'm gonna give you the sleeper of all of them because this boy can run. But I'll tell you about him a little later. You're listening to the Legends Community Show here on the Power of Voices. I'm Greg Bell, giving you kind of the rundown of last weekend's games. Steelers 21, the Browns 18. Okay, here's my 2-cent take on this one. The Browns actually looked like a team. And I will say this only because I think this kid is going to be the future for the Browns, and they got to do something to help him, and that's DeShone Kizer. He's going to make a good quarterback if the Cleveland Browns can do one thing: keep him upright. I don't know what is the problem with Cleveland, and they used to build great lines. What is happening? Even with Joe Thomas still there, this kid can play. That's all I can tell you. If you give him an opportunity, but having him get sacked 7 times, he was 20 of 30. That's over 66%. Okay, 66%. He easily could have been, 25 of 30 or 27 of 30. But you got to keep him upright. I mean, this kid is going to get killed at this rate. 7 sacks in his first debut game. And honestly, if he might have stayed upright a little longer and you gave him a little bit better protection, Cleveland might have won this game. Pittsburgh did not play extremely well. 21-18. Come on now. They're improving, but we'll never see the improvement unless the line can give this kid some protection. And it starts now. I mean, they've got to go out and make sure to keep this kid upright or get him in situations where he can throw the ball a little sooner. DeShone Kizer is going to be the future. He didn't get overly rattled by it, didn't throw a bunch of interceptions. I mean, you get sacked 7 times, you think maybe he threw 3 interceptions. Big Ben threw 2. And his stats were no better, 24-36. He was also 66%. Yeah, he threw for 263, but Kizer was right there, 222. And I'm just telling you, if you give this kid a little bit better protection, he's going to give you a good, solid performance. And it's sad because Cleveland, you can do better. But, man, if this kid spends all of his life on his back, what do you expect him to do? What do you expect him to do? And Jabril Peppers, he actually came out, had a good return day. 1 kickoff return for 14. Want to get that up to 20. And 3 punt returns, 11 yards per punt return. That's good yardage, man. Jabril Peppers, not playing the defense just yet, but he is making a contribution for the Browns. I think we're going to look back on this Browns draft this past year, 2017, and say, damn, they made quality use of what picks they had. And they're moving down, finding DeShone Kizer in the second round, taking Jabril Peppers with the second first-round pick. They made quality picks, and I think it's going to help them in the long run. But, man, they got to do something to keep this kid upright, because if he finds himself like all the other great quarterbacks that came out of college and went to Cleveland, he's going to disappear into purgatory, because you can't win when you're on your back. You just can't do it. And this kid is actually performing at a high level for you guys right now, and you got to find a way to keep him keep him upright. You got to do that. I mean, any quarterback who spends his life on his back is going to be out of his league within 3 years, because the hits are going to mount up without a doubt. Going down here, the Lions shocked everybody. I think when I was sitting there and watching some of the scores, the Lions were down by 10 points at halftime or something like that. What was the score at halftime? They were down 10-9 at halftime, and they were down, I think, in the third quarter I saw it was 17-9. And what kind of outburst did we get? Golden Tate, 10 catches for 107 yards. Matthew Stafford threw for 29 of 41, 292 yards, 4 touchdowns. They just went to the air and shut down the Cardinals, who, believe it or not, had the preseason potential pick MVP of the league, and look where he is now. He's on IR. I hate to say it, man. Every time I'm approached and people say things like, will you go in the Hall of Fame? I say, guys, the difference in the Hall of Fame sometimes is that kid who played injury-free versus injury. And David Johnson, of course, injured, had to leave the game. Did that impact the Cardinals? I can't tell you it did or it didn't. I wasn't there. I'm not on the sideline. I don't even know the chemistry of that team. But I will tell you this, his presence not in the game makes a difference. It gives the Detroit Lions an opportunity to load up because you know that they don't have the capable backup to run the ball the way David Johnson does. And so they just go after the quarterback at that point in time. And for the Cardinals, that meant a loss, 35-23 to the Lions. And how about this one here? And I don't want to say it in a negative way, but I'm gonna tell you, I didn't predict this. The Jaguars beating the Texans 29-7. And let me tell you this, I don't want to hear the talk about the hurricane. Their mind was somewhere else. This and that, and that. These guys are professionals. I'm going to tell you, none of them were harmed by the floods of Houston. J.J. Watt did something amazing, guys. I mean, he started out to try and raise $3 million for the rescue, and now I hear it's somewhere in excess of $40 million. We talk about what athletes do off the field wrong all the time. This is something that you can't help but say is right. J.J. Watt has gone above and beyond. And mind you, these are people who know him and follow his Instagram, his social page, his media page. But the bottom line is he stepped up with $1 million of his own dollars and said, look, we have to help Houston, and now we're going to have to help Miami the same way. I want to see one of the Dolphin players step out and be like J.J. Watson. Here's a time for Jay Cutler maybe. They just gave you $16 million, and you're not even worth half of it. Give up $1 million and help the city of Miami because they're going to be in the same situation that Houston's in. The government has a $1 billion relief fund, but these two hurricanes might take us close to a $500 billion. So step up and do something amazing. Never saw this coming, guys. Blake Bortles, 11 of 21 for 125 yards, 1 touchdown. But you can see what they're going to do in Carolina. And unfortunately, I don't know if he's capable of it, but he's going to try, and that's Leonard Fournette is going to carry the load. 26 carries for 100 yards, 1 touchdown. DeAndre Hopkins, 7 receptions for 55 yards, 1 touchdown. Jaguars just truly outplayed the Texans. If you watched any portion of that game, they just, Houston, I can't say they were better prepared or underprepared. Like I said, I'm not there. I don't know what they went through, what they did. Excuse me. But I do know this. They did not show up last Sunday. And by not showing up, they got their butts spanked. And I'm sure J.J. Watt and the crew there are going to make amends for this. And if it is on their minds, get it off your minds because there's nothing they can physically do to help the situation when they're trying to work as well. They can go out and help clean up and things of that nature, but unfortunately for the fans of Houston, they want to see a good football program. So they'd rather for you guys to put the effort on the field and not lose to what many people projected to be the worst team in the National Football League. But here's the thing when you're considered the worst team in the National Football League, and I tell people this all the time, these guys on each of these 32 teams are the finest 56-man rosters in pro sports. And yes, people can complain, well, Colin Kaepernick's better than many of these quarterbacks. He probably is. So what? He's out of the game right now. But in terms of those 56 guys that are on the active roster for all 32 teams, you're looking at the finest football players in America and probably the finest football players in the world in terms of American football. So on any given Sunday, the worst team can beat the best team if the best team isn't prepared mentally, physically, and spiritually. It's your mind, body, and soul. It has to be on the same accord, or even the worst team in the league can look like the best team in the league. And that's what the Jacksonville Jaguars did last week. They came prepared to play, and play they did. Of course, the Buccaneers and the Dolphins postponed. What other game did we have postponed? I thought I saw one other game. Maybe that was the only one that was postponed. And the Titans start off the season with a big loss. And if you're a Raider hater, you're going to create some kind of, oh, the Raiders did this, the Raiders did that. But I'm a Raider lover, I guess you can say. I played for the Raiders. You guys know I was at the training camp. I told you earlier this summer after training camp, the Raiders look good. And I will say this. I'm very impressed with Marshawn Lynch's his approach to the game, his performance in the game. 18 carries, 76 yards. And it wasn't the 76 yards or the 18 carries. It was his tenacity. He went into beast mode when they needed him most. Fourth quarter, he probably carried the ball 7-8 times, and you saw why they called him beast mode. Shucking, throwing guys off of him, ripping his jersey, jamming him with the straight arm. He looked like beast mode of 2012, 2010. I mean, what he did is amazing to me. I told you, you take a year off, the first thing that sometimes can happen is you can come back and tear a ligament, tear a muscle, because you really they've been tightening over the past year. But they didn't tighten well enough because he looked loose, he looked limbered. Marshawn ran in beast mode, and everybody who watched the game told me, ooh, if he can run the rest of the season like this, David Carr and the Oakland Raiders are going to find themselves in the AFC Championship game against whomever, but they'll probably be representing the AFC in the Super Bowl. 26-16 win over the Titans this past week, and the Eagles down the Redskins 30-17. And I don't know how you want to look at this, but for the Eagle fans, they were happy. They got about a 70 percentile completion rate from Carson Wentz. This is a guy they weren't 100% sold on. There was a battle going on this year over in Philly's training camp, and Carson Wentz won it. 26-39, 307 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. That was the most important piece of the entire equation. And, of course, if you're a Ram fan, you got to say hallelujah. Jared Goff, 21-29, 306 yards, 1 touchdown. And if there's a negative to the Rams' blowout of the Colts, 2 negatives. Andrew Luck desperately needed. I don't even know the kid's name, but I'm going to get it for you here. Whoever this kid is for the Colts, he ain't cutting it. Not cutting it. Scott Townsend, I believe he pronounces it that way. He gave the Rams 2 touchdowns. He just looked rattled from the first play. And if you Chuck Picano, a really good guy, just been put in bad situations, man. First, his own, cancer scare. He fought his way back from that. And now Andrew Luck's out, and he's got this quarterback that Scott Townsend is not going to do what's necessary for this team to win. A 46-9 blowout. You're not seeing good football there, guys. You're just not seeing it. But if you're a Ram fan, you're loving it. You got to love it. They came out and were prepared to play against a very weak Indianapolis Colts team. And you got to think they said they weren't going to rush Andrew Luck, but they're going to have to accelerate it. If he's, in order to even have a respectable season this year, you're going to have to accelerate something because they're going to be well in the tank. Guys, then you got to go to the Chargers and the Broncos before I even think about the last game. Oh, no, don't let me do that. I forgot about the Panthers destroying of 23-3 over the 49ers. 49ers, you know what the season's going to be for you guys. You can't run the ball. You can't pass the ball. You're struggling everywhere, and Cam Newton's back to his old ways, making it happen. Cowboys, 19-3 win over the New York Giants. Oh, my goodness. Giant fans are happy everywhere. They took over right where they left off. And as long as Ezekiel is on the suspended sentence, the Cowboys are going to roll, guys. He ran for 104 yards on 24 carries after not doing pretty much nothing this preseason. And you got to be happy with Dak Prescott. 24-39 for 268 passing yards, 1 touchdown. He looked good, man. He's not. I don't think he's going to have a sophomore slump, kind of the same way Russell Wilson didn't have one. And he looked like he has total command of that offense right now. Total command. So if you're Jerry's world, you got to love what you got right now. Keep Ezekiel out of jail. or out off of the NFL's jail. And this team probably is going to find themselves battling, like I said, maybe the Panthers, maybe the Vikings, because y'all did see what happened with the Vikings, right? 29-19 went over the Saints. Now, I picked a prediction early in that game that Adrian Peterson would get a payback. This wasn't the game, and he got far from a payback. Matter of fact, what's your response to what the look? And if you could read the lips, you knew what he was saying. Run the damn ball. Let's run it down their throat. And it's that's not the style of the New Orleans Saints. And I think Adrian should have known that before we got into the season. Sean Payton likes to air the ball out. He likes to use Drew Brees. And Drew was not on his A game, and neither was Adrian Peterson. Not that he couldn't have been on his A game. He only carried the ball 6 times. Now, as a running back, I'm going to tell you, you only give me 6 carries and expect me to do something in 6 carries, then you're asking a hell of a lot. It generally takes a guy 12 to 13 carries before he'll pop one. You got to feed the beast if you want something to happen on the ground. And Sean Payton has historically been a throwing quarterback. Hopefully Adrian and him will get on the same page. He'll make it a point to try and ground out something, get this kid warmed up and get him going before you allow him to die. And lastly, I got to talk about Delvin Cook because, like I said, any of you guys who tried to tell me you had the guy from Kansas City or, Kareem Hunt, you're lying. You didn't have him on your fantasy team, and I don't think anybody had Delvin Cook running for 22 for 127. Didn't have it. Don't tell me you did. You're lying. And no one had Sam Bradford going 27 to 32 for 346 and 3 touchdowns. And Adam Thielen, don't even know who the kid is. Man, if you were a fantasy football owner this weekend, you got some shocking names thrown at you real quick. They're going to jump high on the list of where they're going. Charger fans, you start the season off with a loss, but I will say it was a respectable loss. You didn't lay down for the Broncos. You made it a tough game for the Broncos, a really tough game. I mean, let's face it, you were down 24-7 in the third quarter, and nobody gave you a chance. But Phillip Rivers showed why he is Phillip Rivers, perennial Hall of Famer in the future. He is going to do some things that are going to shock a lot of people, but none more than what he did last weekend. He carried that team in the second half. That's what you expect out of Phillip Rivers, something you're going to get out of him all year long, guys. You're listening to the Legends Community Show here on the Power of Voices. My name is Greg Bell, guys. I'm here every weekend talking a lot of sports, having a lot of fun with you guys. And before I get out of here today, I'm going to take 8 minutes to talk to you about something I did this past weekend. I actually went and donated my time and effort to help the bills and some other things, but I wanted to share with you guys. If you haven't taken a look at it, take a look at it now. This is Athletic Wisdom for Children, How to Manage Life's Wins and Losses. It's a $15 book, guys, signed $20 with mailing. Yours truly wrote the book, so I'm happy about that. And it's gotten a lot of really quality responses. There's a intro in here from a PGA pro that I've known for a lifetime. The commissioner of the National Football League has an acknowledgement in here. If you haven't gotten a copy of it, go to athletesforlife.org. It's Athletes for Life. It's a donation, $20 donation. It'll get you a great copy of a very well-written book. It's amazing, man. I tell people, they say, well, how did you get into that, Greg? I said, it's kind of funny, but I have a consultant who helps me out 200%, and I got to give Ann her props for helping me out. But one of the things she told me is it's easy to do if you just take the time and concentrate on it. So I spent 2 hours every morning just writing and putting my thoughts down in words. And we came up with what we think is a very nice written book. Let me give you a comment from Roger Goodell. Greg is a true leader who does a terrific job of helping young athletes see the bigger picture in life. I thank him for that comment, but more importantly, man, the NFL has been a supporter of Athletes for Life for some 15 years now. And it's through some of the programs we had in the National Football League that I've continued to carry on, even though the National Football League doesn't have them anymore, those being the junior player development and the high school player development programs. But we've continued to carry those programs on into the community, and they're making a difference for a lot of these kids. And at one point, I didn't know if I'd ever do this, but it's kind of interesting, man, when you sit down at a computer and just start typing, putting your words to pen and your thoughts to paper. Uh, we have a program tied to the foundation called the PASS program. And if you want more information, like I said, go to www.athletesforlife.org. But PASS stands for Passion, Attitude, Sacrifice equals Success. And all I can tell you, if you kind of put your life in perspective, you can't do anything really positive in life unless you have a dream, a passion of what you're doing. I joke with kids all the time that I've never worked a day in my life, and I'm 55 now, guys. But everything I've ever done in life has been through a passion that I had for it. And so I don't call that work. And the attitude that we talk about in the program and in the book is about having a positive attitude. And one thing I've always been able to say, a positive attitude truly generates a positive result. And I can guarantee you, if you have a negative attitude, guys, you're going to fall flat on your face because you're going to get a negative result. The sacrifice, guys, we're seeing it today. Everything that we see in Houston, everything you're going to see in Miami. A lot of people are going to have to make a sacrifice in their life to get their life back in order. And that's the same thing that goes for a young person trying to make a career out of something. You're going to have to make a sacrifice. Mine was probably the ultimate. I told people there were a lot of things that I gave up in life and didn't even try and don't really care to try. I party with the best, but I just don't drink. I don't do drugs. That was something that I wanted to sacrifice to get the success I have out of life. And one of the things the book is going to share with you is, I had a fortunate opportunity to get to know a little bit of the mentor side of John Wooden. If you can see in the book, we used to sponsor his John Wooden tournament every year. I don't know if you can see that picture there, but it's a good little picture. Shows me with John, and I used to sit with him, and there's one of his wisdoms or one of his successes in the pyramid to success. He talks about the word success. And the one thing he always told me was, you got to explain to these kids that it's a direct result of self-satisfaction, of being the best that they were capable of being. And I think if you really start to really dive into that, you'll really understand that everybody's success is going to be different in life. But if you know what makes your life successful, for me, it was to be able to live out my dream, to work for myself, to do the things that I wanted to do, to, in essence, own 24 hours, 7 days a week of my time. That was my success. Not how much money we got in the bank, what car we drive, what home we live in. Those are material wealths. But what makes you successful is the things that you do. And like I tell everybody, one of the things I learned when I was very young is that a gift is not truly a gift unless you're able to share it with someone else. Hey, guys, I've enjoyed you being with me today. We're winding it down. This is Greg Bell. You've been listening to the Legends Community Show right here on the Power of Voices. Stay tuned. We got more action to come on the Power of Voices, but right now I'm checking out, and I'll see you guys next week. Take care.